Israel and the Trump administration should be very afraid. Brigadier General Mohammad Reza Nakhdi, deputy coordinator of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, said in the interview with Iranian media that Iran's missile and defense infrastructure emerged completely unscathed, literally, quote, not even a scratch the size of a fly's feather, end quote, stating that despite heavy attacks from Israel and the U.S., during the 12-day war, everything remains fully intact. He added that none of Iran's missile cities, underground and fortified sites where missiles are stored and launched, were damaged at all. Launch operations, he says, resumed quickly after any of the attempted strikes on the missile launchers. Nakhdi draws a comparison to Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza. He points out that even after 2 years of heavy fire on the Gaza Strip, Israel has failed to destroy Hamas's tunnel network, the very tunnel network that their tanks have been driving over. By implication, Iran's tunnels and its defenses that lie underneath them have proved even more secure after just 12 days of that war. Missiles are Iran's key and, if not, critical deterrent. If they're truly untouched, this means that Iran's strike capacity is as strong as ever. Nakhdi rejects enemy claims that they destroyed half of Iran's missile launchers. 50% is not only wrong, but they were unable to destroy even 3% of the launchers. Less than 3%. These launchers are fully indigenous to Iran, meaning they are made in Iran with their local technology. Nakhdi describes these launchers as simple enough to produce in a blacksmith shop. Post-war Iran now has more launchers than before, he says, with the capacity to crank out tens of thousands more if needed. This all began on June 13th when Israel launched what Nakhdi describes as an unprovoked war of aggression against it. It wasn't just a skirmish. This was a major escalation. Over 1,000 Iranians were killed, including major military commanders, nuclear scientists, and civilians. The U.S. got involved at the end of the 12-day war, bombing 3 of Iran's nuclear sites, which Iran calls a grave violation of international law, because it is. By June 24th, Iran had launched successful retaliatory operations against Israel, forcing Israel to halt the attacks because it had run out of most of its missile interceptors. And of course, everyone remembers the imagery of Tel Aviv and other Israeli cities being absolutely smashed by Iran's ballistic missile system. So Iran didn't back down and request a ceasefire. In his own words, quote, "We had no problem. The pressure was bearable. The forces were standing firm," end quote. He notes field commanders reported no operational issues, which underscores Iran's resistance and resilience. Now, it's crucial to remember this because it shows that this short but intense conflict not only tested Iran's military might against 2 major powers, but it also demonstrated the limitations of what the U.S. and Israel can truly do. Nakhdi has painted a picture of Iran not just defending itself, but dominating the battlefield through its own smart, homegrown strategies and technologies. Now, Nakhdi did not mince words here. We have to go over exactly who he said Iran was fighting. He said, quote, "We are fighting a conflict with NATO. There is America, there's England, there's France, Jordan, and the Zionist regime." He detailed how U.S. bases in neighboring countries, radar, listening devices, and even foreign embassies in Tehran were feeding real-time intelligence to Israel, and that continues to this day. Although Iran, as you see, they are clamping down on this spy network that exists within their country. Satellites and dozens of foreign drones are patrolling the Persian Gulf daily, and the spying continues deep in Iran's territory. We have to talk about the scale of this war because, similar to Ukraine, similar to China, similar to a lot of U.S. wars, it is a coalition mission. It is not simply the United States. This is why Iran has said it is at war with NATO itself. It's not just dodging Israeli strikes. It is countering a total network, a complete networked alliance with its own technological and military capabilities. But despite this, despite the global hegemony that the U.S. presides over, this strategy has failed against Iran. Mohammad Reza Naqvi further underscored that the enemy brought their full capabilities to bear, including never before seen weapons, but Iran's defenses held. And what he's talking about are these drones that Israel sent into Iran. This standout example during the 12-day war, where the IRGC was able to shoot down 43 advanced drones belonging to Israel and likely provided to them by the United States. Iran eliminated more than 140 hostile drones during this period, attributing this success to quote unquote localized capabilities, meaning that Iran is building this technology right at home. And he says that these technologies actually outperformed the Russian S-300, which now is outdated to the Russian S-400 air defense system. Iranian-made weapons performed better in the war than expected, and that these domestic systems are not only effective, but they are modifiable and upgradable. Flexibility, which, according to General Naqvi, is a unique advantage of indigenous technology, allowing for quick adaptations on the fly. Mohammad Reza Naqvi frames this victory as proof that relying on homegrown power lets Iran withstand the most advanced adversaries. Here's what he said: Iran has defeated the whole military might of the world in the 12-day war despite the enemy's new weapons. The enemy, he says, suffered a severe blow while Iran emerged without major setbacks. Now, this completely changes the narrative. It points back to a broader theme: self-reliance. By producing simple, scalable launchers and superior defense systems, Iran has turned a defensive war into a demonstration of its own strength. No wonder Naqvi implies that their tunnels are more secure than ever. So let's look at how the Israeli media has been panicking about this situation. According to Israel Hayom, Iran is possibly rebuilding a ring of fire around Israel again, and that it's coming back. That Iran is rebuilding deterrence after what it calls a shock from Operation Rising Lion. That's what Israel called its operation during the 12-day war. It says that while Iran is dealing with trauma from the surprise attacks and heavy blows to its so-called proxy network and facing external pressures such as snapback sanctions, we see that Iran is pushing its intercontinental ballistic missiles to their limits and beyond them, with ranges now beyond 5,500 kilometers, with the Khorram Shahar 5 being tested recently, which is also capable of speeds maybe up to, and this is now still reportedly, but maybe up to 12,000 kilometers, giving Iran a huge strike distance to work with, which is, mind you, a warning to not only all of the Gulf states, not only Israel, but really anyone that stands within 12,000 kilometers of Iran that threatens its security. So Iranian officials, including Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, have lifted the 2,200 kilometer range limit, allowing unlimited development of their missile program as a core military strength. And now there's also growing internal pressure for the development of nuclear weapons, which is going to be even more likely now that the EU, or the so-called E3, and the United States have essentially green-lit the reimposition of sanctions. Advisor Ali Shamkhani urged the development of nuclear weapons for deterrence. This is advisor to the supreme leader. And 70 ministers, 70 MPs sent a letter demanding authorization of nuclear weapons, stating that Iran has the capability, but not the current intent. So Iran is also, according to Israel, rebuilding the axis of resistance. Now, this is a shocking admission because the axis of resistance has been deemed dead for so many months, especially after the 12-day war, but even before this. We see, according to Israel Hayom, that Abdullah Saberi was appointed to the head of the Quds Forces Palestine branch to revive Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in Gaza, and to oversee the redevelopment of Hezbollah and possible resistance in Syria, relying on units like the 840, 340, and 190 for smuggling and tech support. Officials such as Parliament Speaker Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf have emphasized renewing a quote-unquote ring of fire around Israel, by keeping supply routes to Hezbollah open and boasting about exporting missiles, drones, and warships. Now, this is all framing from the Israeli media itself. Iran remains on high alert, distrusting messages from Israel via Russia about no renewed war, which comes as no surprise given that every time Israel has made any overtures toward peace, wink, wink, the current ceasefire that is already broken, as well as so many other instances, the ceasefire in Lebanon, for example, where Israel has killed hundreds, if not thousands, of more civilians during this so-called ceasefire. Iran is supposedly also trying to calm its public while preparing for threats. Now, Ali Khamenei rejects U.S. negotiations at this time, viewing them as capitulation to Donald Trump, and warns Israel to prepare for Iran's potential return to Syria, of all places, to strengthen alliances against Israel. Now, this is the Israeli perspective, but it highlights a deep panic of Iran's actual capabilities, not its vulnerabilities, and its determination to rebound, contrasting with the claims of Western mainstream media and Donald Trump himself, who have declared Iran dead. So we got to recap the most important things that we've covered here. We see zero damage to Iran's missile systems, according to Brigadier General Mohammad Reza Nakti, not even a scratch the size of a fly's feather. We see that only 3% of the launchers were destroyed, according to Iran, not the 50% as was claimed. We know that Israel and the U.S. were the ones to start the war, but Iran is pointing at an entire NATO alliance as being the aggressors toward it, and the reason why it needs to build these massive indigenous systems of missiles, drones, missile launchers, and maybe even nuclear weapons first. We see the Israeli media panicking about the possibility of Iran rebounding from the 12-day war, and in many respects, all of the indications show that it has. Now, this is critical to note that Iran has these capabilities and showed them not only during the 12-day war, but is continuing to communicate that it has them. Many people were angry who watched my program prior to Operation True Promise 3 because they thought that Iran was being, and many of these folks reside in the West, they thought Iran was being too diplomatic, that it wasn't taking steps to not only defend itself, but to ensure that it was protected and was able to develop further from the threat of U.S. aggression. And then the 12-day war happened, and Iran showed through Operation True Promise 3 that it could hold its own, that it could not only absorb a significant amount of damage, 1,000 civilians being killed, and as well as many scientists and generals, but that its overall military capacity could not only withstand 12 days of heavy fighting, but that it could be rebuilt thereafter. The self-reliance that Iran has demonstrated is truly a game changer. We have seen it in other places before. We've seen it with the DPRK, for example, where the world, led by the United States, sanctioned the DPRK into suffocation and starvation. And what did the DPRK do? It built ICBMs, it built nuclear weapons, and now the United States thinks twice before attacking it again. And now we see a similar dynamic happening with Iran. This 12-day war, Iran did not have to go through the Korean War, for example, which was a 3+ year massively destructive conflict that killed millions in Korea. But even just this 12-day war that Israel attempted with the full support of the United States has exposed Israel's deep weaknesses and has shown that Iran's missile technology, which it says is very much ready to go again, is capable of not only doing damage to the Israeli regime, but is capable of forcing it to back off. Vladimir Putin communicated this to Iran, that Israel was backing off as of right now, but no one can believe anything they say. I think that this is a truly historic moment in the history of the world right now, where we see a country in West Asia that has been virtually surrounded by U.S. military bases, that has been directly attacked by Israel, and that has been supporting the resistance from the very beginning, whether it's in Palestine or Lebanon, be able to withstand one of the most difficult circumstances that we see in the region. We have to be very real about this. While the axis of resistance is indeed rebuilding and strengthening, we saw major hits. For example, the collapse of Syria. We saw major hits in the absolute bludgeoning of Lebanon's infrastructure and its civilians as a way to try to defeat and weaken Hezbollah. And we also, of course, see the massive destruction in Palestine, in Gaza, in the West Bank, committed by Israel just in the last few years alone. And through all of this chaos, Iran has demonstrated and is now communicating that its missiles are locked, its missiles are loaded, and that they are building even stronger and better capabilities amid the crisis. And now there must be a note on Iran's relationship to Russia and China in all of this, because there has been a lot of criticism I have received through people who watch this program on this fact. And I want to address the concerns, for example, of Vladimir Putin meeting with Mr. al-Shara, the so-called president of Syria. I want to address rumors that Russia and Iran's relations are tense, and this is why Iran doesn't accept military help from Russia to the extent that it could. And I want to address also the fact that Russia and China are often accused of not helping Iran and the axis of resistance enough. I think these narratives sow a particular kind of division that only serves the empire and isn't really based on reality or facts. For one, Russia and China both hold a foreign policy that is about full respect to international law and non interference in the political affairs of other countries. Neither of them have any desire to dictate political affairs anywhere. And this includes Syria. This includes the entirety of West Asia. Its relations, both of them, and particularly China economically, are critical for the survival of Iran and the rest of the axis of resistance. Because if we look at the relationship of Iran to the axis of resistance and then Iran to China and Russia, without those deep bonds, with any one of them being severed, we see the weakening of the others. So, for example, China buys 90% of Iran's energy, its oil. Without that, Iran would not be able to build the capacity that it has militarily. It would not be able to build these missiles. It wouldn't have the fuel to charge itself economically. It wouldn't be able to get the materials and the technologies to build these weapons. And therefore, without China's economic assistance, its own ability to defend itself would be highly degraded. And then if Iran's ability to defend itself is highly degraded, then its ability to support the axis of resistance is degraded, whether we see it through the lens of Ansarallah or the Palestinian resistance itself or Hezbollah. So there's one point. And then the next is that oftentimes these accusations come within a desire for Russia and China and Iran to get into a confrontation with the U.S. and Israel, because many see this as coming anyway. And truly, I actually agree with that last point. But when it comes to the broader approach, Russia, China, and Iran are playing a very long game, one that is actually quite devastating to the maintenance of the U.S. empire. Because as the U.S. and Israel wreak havoc and destruction around them, China and Russia included, as well as Iran, are building bridges. They're building economic ties, they're building infrastructure, and they're developing in a way that will sustain not only their people's long-term economic needs, but also potentially the economic and infrastructure needs of a broader multipolar world. This means that capabilities have to be carefully assessed, and it means that the foreign policies of each respective country have to be conducted in a way that serves both national interests as a priority, first of all, and then, of course, the interests of the world. It doesn't mean that there's a clash between these two things, but what it means is that there are going to be trade-offs, as well as there's going to be particular approaches and strategies implemented that lie maybe beneath the eyes of Western observers. And what do I mean by this? Well, look at Russia and China's support not only for Iran, but the rest of the axis of resistance. While they both maintain relations with Israel, and many have criticized this, they have also maintained a diplomatic superiority in the region, which has won them massive numbers of friends, including the Arab people themselves all across the region when we look at China. But it also has helped in ensuring that if any resistance, if any government, if any victories of the people actually do occur, like we have seen with Iran, like we have seen in other instances in the past, should that happen again, that these countries, that these forces will have staunch support, especially at the development level, from countries like China and Russia, which have the capabilities of doing it. When it comes to issues like Syria, when it comes to issues like Palestine, we have to remember that the United States and Israel are hell bent and committed to creating the utmost and maximum level of chaos and to draw in their opponents, to draw in their biggest quote unquote adversaries in order to weaken them. And this is why China in particular says it is not going to enter into conflicts that it has no business or party to, has not even been requested to get into. And this has to be noted, is very important when it comes to Syria and when it comes to the entire axis of resistance. Whether it is Iran saying it will build indigenously, it will build indigenous capabilities first before it goes to Russia. And mind you, Iran has technicians, engineers, etc., training in Russia. It is learning Russian technology. Iranians are doing this, and they're preparing to be able to use Russian technology, air defense systems from China. They're doing this. There is a deep relationship between the Iranian tech sector and its military industrial complex and Russia and China. But when it comes to the broader strategy of Russia and China, it's always going to be non-interference. And this is respected by the axis of resistance. When we look at how the axis of resistance has behaved throughout this 2+ years of monumental genocide and out of control warmongering by the US and Israel, the axis of resistance has not once demanded that Russia and China change their policy, because their policy serves to as a model globally for how the rest of the world should behave. And their policy also brings with it tangible benefits to the region that could very well tip the balance in the future. And the axis of resistance has taken the position. If you've seen any statement, please let me know in the comments of major criticisms from forces within the Palestinian resistance, within the Ansarallah, within Hezbollah, etc. But from my estimation, the overall line, the final conclusion is that the strategy is more so to build deeper ties with these countries, to have them as mediators, and to conduct business, military, any kind of ties with great care and subtlety, meaning that Ansarallah can get assistance from Iran. It can also have economic ties with China and Russia too, which allow Ansarallah to build up its military capabilities, its defense posture, as well as meet the needs of its people. This is what a full picture of the world order looks like. What Iran has shown us is that it has the ability to strike back, and that it is preparing to do so again. And it is now furiously rebuilding its missile capabilities to the point where it is stronger than it was before. This is likely why Netanyahu has tapped out of waging war on Iran for now, at least rhetorically, by communicating through Vladimir Putin to Iran that he does not seek another kind of 12-day war with Iran now. But we know that it is coming. And when it does come, we will see Iran's capabilities once again demonstrated. At the very least, it will be at the baseline it was during the 12-day war. But according to Mohammad Reza Nakdi, as well as many Iranian officials, the capabilities are likely better and likely stronger than before. The Karashimam missile, the hypersonic missiles that Iran is building, the air defense systems that it is building, the lessons that it learned from Israel's surprise attack, its clampdown on intelligence interference and operations within its countries by Mossad and other related intelligence agencies, UK, US, etc. It's unity built through that 12-day war across the population. All of this serves as major deterrence warnings to Israel and the United States. Beware and attack at your own discretion with all the consequences that will be brought to bear on Israel and the United States for it. So the warning has been set. Is the war imminent? Let me know in the comments. Hit that like button because that helps boost all videos in YouTube's algorithm. And until next time, everyone.